Good morning, or good everyone, depending on where you are, and welcome to today's webinar, Carrier-Grade Wi-Fi is not a utility. How carrier-grade Wi-Fi can help service providers monetize their network with Benu Networks. My name is Adlan Fella, I'm Managing Director at Wi-Fi 360, and I'll be your host and moderator today. Wi-Fi may be everywhere, but best effort service is no longer the norm. Consumers are looking for Wi-Fi to be trusted and secure, seamlessly connected, have high quality of service and a high quality of experience. In order for service providers to maintain customers and monetize their network, consumers should recognize the service offered by their provider as unique, desirable, and valuable. So after a brief presentation on market trends, today you will hear from our guest speaker, Clayton Wagar, Chief Solution Architect at Benu Networks. We'll then allow some time for questions from the audience. So without further ado, let's get started here. Some housekeeping items today on how to use the webinar interface. You can grab the tab, click the arrow to open and close a control panel on the right. You can click square to toggle view window between full screen and window mode. You also have a choice in terms of the audio between a telephone or using a microphone and speakers. Please use the chat box to submit your questions throughout the event, and we'll review them before the end of the webinar. Some commonly asked questions. This event is being recorded and will be available for replay within the next 24 hours, along with the slide deck. For more information, you can visit the y-fi360.com website. So again, my name is Adlan Fella. I'll be discussing the Carrier Wi-Fi state of the market as a prelude to Benu Networks presentation. Before I do so, I would like to better understand who's the audience today listening to this webinar. So I'll do a quick poll, and please take a few seconds to answer the questions. Which part of the ecosystem do you belong to? So we'll give it a few seconds here for people to answer. Okay, we still have some responses coming in. Okay, let's give it a couple more seconds. Okay, so I'm closing the poll now and sharing the results. So we have a big representation for both equipment vendors and consultants, press, analysts at 39% each, followed by 22% software vendors, 12% mobile operators, 4% fixed operators. So thanks for taking the time to respond to the poll here. I'm going to hide the poll and get started. Okay, so the agenda today for my brief presentation is to provide you with an update on the drivers and enablers of carrier Wi-Fi, review some of the carrier strategies, and then finally moving on to the challenges. So mobile data storm continues driving the need really for more and more capacity, and that's really accelerated as consumers start to use a great variety of wireless connected devices, such as cars, for example. That's reflected, of course, in the price that operators are willing to pay for spectrum, as we saw in the recent AWS auction in the US. And the numbers vary, but Wi-Fi is becoming really the preferred connection for smartphone users. You know, we see a lot of numbers floating around. You know, is it 80% of mobile data driven on Wi-Fi pipes? You know, I think the number really varies from country to country, as highlighted in this a recent Mobidia survey of smartphone users in a number of countries. Bottom line here is that it's those countries where tight data cap restrictions on 3G and 4G certainly is a contributor factor to Wi-Fi popularity, where the data allowance is much less generous in Asia than, for example, in North America. So, end users, really simply prefer Wi-Fi, and it's there, and it's ubiquitous. And it's accelerated by phenomena like bring your own devices, both in the enterprise and other environments. At the same time, mobile operators are facing increased capex, as we all know, and decreasing voice revenues. So their motivation is to find ways to reduce network cost while improving indoor coverage and the overall customer experience and loyalty. They're also looking, as we'll see, to use Wi-Fi beyond offload. And this is really what we're going to be discussing today, and actually monetizing that Wi-Fi connectivity. Some of the enablers include developments in the technology to enable that transition from best effort to highly managed Wi-Fi experience. This has been really evolving in two ways, in terms of performance and in terms of usability. So there's a significant wave of hotspot upgrades underway, driven by the uptake of 802.11ac and hotspot 2.0 NGH, referring to next generation hotspot. These two technology shifts are the most important in the shift of public Wi-Fi from best effort towards carrier grade. But just as important as performance and capacity is the emergence of carrier class tools for planning, managing, and optimizing the network. On the device side, what enables a strong Wi-Fi experience are improvements in terms of Wi-Fi connectivity management client applications for devices, security using EAP, SIM, EAP, aka protocols, part of the 2.0 standard, but also as an independent standard on its own right, and connectivity policy solutions applied by carriers. Another important enabler is, of course, the availability of more spectrum being made available in the 5 GHz band. And of course, the more spectrum, the more capacity available. So all these elements are contributing to a change in perception in the carrier's attitude towards Wi-Fi. In the last survey we did for the Wireless Broadband Alliance, we can see an improvement in the attitude, the confidence towards Wi-Fi. Moving on to carrier strategies, all of these changes doesn't happen overnight. Much of the current Wi-Fi business is still focused on traditional providers and business models. Really, pure plays and MSOs remain the biggest deployer of hotspots in this year, and we control the largest installed base. But new emerging services like wholesale and a number of business models being tested, as we'll see in the next few slides. So starting with the MNOs, mobile network operators, the primary motivator incentive for them to deploy Wi-Fi initially was offload. In some instances, it was reported that up to 50% of cellular traffic that disappeared overnight when seamless authentication was added to an existing stable Wi-Fi installation, such as an airport. A few MNOs have said that once they have LTE deployed, there's less need for Wi-Fi. But the larger number of servers, and when 4G is offered, overall data usage leaps dramatically, so increasing the need for offload. So there's a balance there, and depending on the situation, it's contributing to more Wi-Fi need. We estimated that in 2014, about 30% of capacity from mobile operators came from Wi-Fi offload. We think that trend is going to go down as MNOs deploy small cells, but just because their small cells have Wi-Fi integrated with them. So as a pure play Wi-Fi, it will be declining. The key, I think that the mobile operators are looking beyond offload and really trying to harden Hotspot 2.0 and NGH to make Wi-Fi access points fully manage elements of their networks, their headnet networks, with seamless and really dynamic allocation of traffic between both types of connections. Key growth areas, include enterprise services that are growing in importance as companies are moving to mobile-first strategies and expect really employees to be able to communicate anywhere. The voice over Wi-Fi is emerging. There's talk of Stampede to offer next generation Wi-Fi calling, service bundles, and eventually a quad play as Wi-Fi supports similar quality of service to a carrier licensed network. On the MNO side, on the MSO side, which is the wireline operators, in North America and Europe, they have been very aggressive deployers of carrier Wi-Fi. And, a number of MSOs such as Comcast, Time Warner, and other US cable companies offer free access to Wi-Fi hotspot as an extension of their service delivery at the home. So this concept is evolving to support more services, including TV everywhere, in which video is delivered to tablets. Primary motivators remains customer retention, churn reduction. Customer experience and churn reduction. And until now, this is a capital-intensive exercise to deploy hotspots in public spaces. They say following the mobile density, but that capex continues to be justified by the impact on churn reduction. In terms of the community Wi-Fi, what we call hotspots, these are projections that we have done for some research we done for iPass, and this is really skyrocketing number of hotspots, essentially due to the fact that a lot of them are opt-in. Opt-out, meaning that the operator can light on those double SSIDs without necessarily the knowledge of the consumer. And if the consumer doesn't want to share their SSID capacity, they will have to opt out themselves. And so we have companies like Fawn who have pioneered this model and have deals with many telcos like BT and Dutch Telecom, and have recently partnered to start offering same community hotspots to small and medium enterprises. The business model is really proliferating, especially in terms of aggregators and neutral host. Companies such as iPass are aggregating hotspots from different venues, or Boingos who are providing neutral host services in premium venues like stadiums, are increasingly becoming important. Carriers assemble virtual networks based on hotspots all owned by many parties around the world, so that also encourage the expansion of aggregators. And in many cases, the different approaches will overlap and be pursued by the same companies. So we see an emergence of a number of business models that are being tested. Some of the business opportunities include Wi-Fi roaming and location-based services as being some of the top monetization strategies. To finish off some of the challenges ahead, the reality is today Wi-Fi networks are islands of networks. They're like medieval networks. They don't provide a consistent experience from one network to the other. They don't necessarily talk to each other. NGH and roaming is still a work in progress. And so that results in sometimes a very poor experience for the user. and that poor experience translates into a more difficult way to monetize those networks. So there's still investments required and some challenges both on the technology side, on the spectrum side, and on the business modeling side. As part of the survey we did, clarifying the business model is still an important issue for 63% of the respondents. And so hopefully today with some of the ideas that Benu Networks will share with us, we'll see ways, avenues towards monetization of those networks beyond offload, beyond just churn reduction, which is really what it is driving today. Some of the challenges include access to venues. Most of the hotspots, public hotspots out there, are owned by venues like hotels and airports and shopping malls, and the venue owners want to keep control of the customer experience and the assets within their environment, and so that represents a challenge for operators to provide a compelling reason for the venue owners to share those sites. And of course, LTU and license, may pretty much disrupt the Wi-Fi. This is still work in progress, and will be part of the, I believe, release 13 of 3GPP. But it's still a debate that's heating up, which is something that the Wi-Fi industry needs to watch very carefully. So closing thoughts, Wi-Fi is becoming at the center stage of carrier strategies. It is everywhere. It is ubiquitous. It's not going to go anywhere. I think beyond the debate, small cells versus Wi-Fi, I think the Wi-Fi is there. The business model are proliferating and being tested. There are a number of challenges ahead in terms of required investments and clarifying the business model. And who knows, it is said that the future of wireless would be this global alternative network with dark Wi-Fi capacity made available to MVNOs, like we saw recently with the Project 5 from Google. There is disruption is coming, and it's coming fast, and I think carriers need to be prepared to embrace Wi-Fi beyond offload. So that pretty much ends up my presentation. A few words about Wi-Fi 360. We're division of Maravedis. We provide market research as well as content marketing, and we're the official research supplier for the WBA. If you want more information, go to our website, y-fi360.com, and some free resources here. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Clayton Wagar from Benu Networks, who's going to share his vision of Wi-Fi is not a utility. Clayton?
Great. Thank you very much, Adelaine. Let me get set here, and I'll just do a quick verification that you're seeing my screen.
Yeah. Would you like to do the poll right now?
I think, yeah, that's a great idea if you'd like to do that, sure.
Okay. All right. So we would like to ask the audience, what is the most important next step when it comes to your Wi-Fi strategy? Is it improving coverage? Is it an easier sign-on and onboarding? Is monetization strategies or analytics and big data? So I'm going to give some time to the audience to answer the questions here.
Perfect. And I purposely chose 4 answers that you had to pick from. I didn't give you a none of the above or all of the above, because I wanted to see out of these 4. I know Adelaine talked about the idea that there's some natural evolution of where we go, some real easy stuff around monetization, or at least that's where the effort is being put around analytics and location-based services and roaming in some of these areas. So giving the respondents today an opportunity to pick among these 4.
Okay, so we have about 60% of people voted. I'm going to close the poll now. Share the results. So not surprisingly, 48% have indicated that monetization strategies are their most important next step in terms of Wi-Fi strategy. And that's followed equally between improving coverage analytics and big data. And the last one is easier sign-on onboarding at 15%. Is this in line with your understanding of the market, Clayton?
Absolutely. I think that when you look at what our service provider customers and the service providers that I've talked to across the globe, what they're looking to do is to understand how to take this asset that they have been in process of building, maybe they have plans to build or make more robust, and determine what the next steps are with regards to monetization. You mentioned, Adeline, that one of the primary ideas, or one of the first cases around monetization, was really something very simple, which was churn reduction, at least in the case of wireline operators who were building supplemental Wi-Fi networks. And so, I think that there have been several strong examples of that. Many service providers have been relatively tight-lipped about the impact of churn reduction to their bottom line, and then again top line with the Wi-Fi network deployments. But having visited with many of them and talked with many of them, I know that it's certainly making a measurable impact. But it's only the first step. It's as you mentioned, it's only the first step towards what we expect to be a much stronger monetization plan around the Wi-Fi networks that are being deployed. So I appreciate everyone's time today. My name is Clayton Wagar. I am the Chief Solutions Architect for Benu Networks. We are a venture-backed company based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and we have been working in the Wi-Fi aggregation, Wi-Fi service delivery space for a number of years. It's one of our product lines, and we have, as we'll talk about today, a case study that we have been involved with over the past couple of years with a large operator in deployment of Carriergrade Wi Fi. Today we're also going to talk about not only the underpinnings of that, which is the technology, the network technology, which is necessary to enable some of these monetization strategies, but also we're going to talk a little bit about the strategies themselves. I will say that if someone is expecting a magic bullet, that this is you're certainly not going to see one, because I think if I had a magic bullet, it would be a much different presentation today. I think that in my experience over the past several years working with folks across the globe, what I've found is that the path towards generating revenue from a Wi-Fi network is very bespoke and very personal to an operator. And in fact, for many operators, it varies by region. It could have to do with the part of the globe that you're in, the dynamics of the competitive mobile networks. It could have to do with what the market will bear in terms of revenue per user. It certainly has to do with population densities and the availability of the service provider Wi-Fi. So today we'll talk about some of the strong themes that are consistent among many of the both strategic as well as business planners in the operators that I've visited with, and we'll again talk about the underpinnings of that from a technology standpoint. So I think everyone's probably here because we all agree that Wi-Fi is certainly everywhere. It certainly acts like a utility. Because I know I'm increasingly surprised when I'm in a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi these days. I travel quite a bit, and when I end up someplace that doesn't have an available Wi-Fi network, at least ones that are available privately to other folks, certainly I like for there to be a public network, that I'm very surprised when I'm in one of those locations. These numbers that we have here are they're dated simply because they've been written down. The number of Wi-Fi hotspots is growing with great velocity every day. The number of devices that support Wi-Fi are certainly exploding. The number of devices which are Wi-Fi only is very significant, and we can't forget that when we talk about the strategies, especially as we start to talk about licensed versus Wi-Fi. Although I think in the margin, I think in 5 to 10 years' time, we'll be talking about those two technologies being a ubiquitous network. As we sit here today, there's certainly a lot of competition between licensed mobile technologies and Wi-Fi technologies. At least the perception is that they are in competition with one another for the connectivity. But those devices that only have Wi-Fi, I certainly am thinking of lots of tablets that have been shipped over the past many years. Certainly when we get into Internet of Things devices, so Nest thermostats and refrigerators and smart TVs, certainly all of those are Wi-Fi only devices in large quantity. In fact, I saw in the last 2 weeks, I believe it was, that there will be a Wi-Fi Barbie doll that you'll be able to program using Wi-Fi technologies with an app or a web browser. So there's no limit really to what we're going to see being connected, and that's part of what has made the Wi-Fi ecosystem so robust. The fact is that because it uses unlicensed technologies, because of the economic price point with which we were able to deploy Wi-Fi access points and Wi-Fi chipsets and devices, that those very dynamics, the economics and the unlicensed spectrum, have made Wi-Fi ubiquitous. However, that's also the downside. The downside is that it has become so ubiquitous that it ends up looking a lot like a utility, certainly one that people expect to be there. When we talk about carrier-grade Wi-Fi, we want to take the discussion from something of a generic utility and bring it up and talk about the attributes that a network should have in order to enable ARPU generation, monetization of that network. Certainly, we want the network to have to be trusted and secure. We want it to have. We want to know that the devices that connect to it are verified, and so too, the end user wants to know that the network they connect to is a trusted network. We want the experience and the onboarding to be seamless. We want to make those connections as intuitive as possible, even to the point of being invisible. On a panel last week in the Asia region, we were talking about how the over-the-top folks, I think of Google and Facebook and Snapchat and all these guys who really ride over the top of these networks that we're building, all of them spend their days trying to figure out how to get folks to stay on the platform for as long as possible. They want eyeballs as long as possible on their app, on their website. In fact, one of the strong value propositions for a service provider is getting out of the way as quickly as possible to make that onboarding experience, the connectivity experience, seamless, intuitive, fast, invisible, trusted. Pick some of those favorite terms that you want, but we want to have that connection. That's the value proposition, the very base value proposition, is that connection. And we also want these networks to be highly available. We want them to start to have the attributes of a licensed mobile network that we expect to be available all the time in the locations where we are. And so if we dig down one level of detail more, we find out that there's really some base constructs underneath of that, like the authentication experience and the type of back office elements that the network connects to, whether they are authentication elements in our own network as a service provider or those of our partners in the case of roaming. We want to be able to enforce policy and the quality of experience in the network. We want the network to understand that there are different applications and different users and different devices and be able to react to the different permutations of those three things. We want to have session persistence, or really what this feeds into is a mobility domain. So one of the beauties of the work that's been done in the 3GPP working group over the past several decades is something that we borrow heavily from in carrier-grade Wi-Fi today, and that's that we have a very large mobility domain. And that gives us a couple really interesting attributes in the network that can be used going forward. The first of which is, of course, that a device can roam from access point to access point and have session continuity. If they're on a voice call, or if they're doing a video chat, or if they're in the middle of an upload, that as they move from access point to access point, that's retained and is consistent. They don't have to restart a session or re-authenticate. The second thing is, in a large mobility domain, you have a much stronger point of leverage because you're in an aggregated traffic model. We have a much stronger point of leverage to integrate services into that. We know that there's been a revolution in data center technologies over the past many years that have allowed services to be deployed rather than in physical servers in virtual machines. Certainly, it's proof Amazon's cloud, Microsoft's Azure, the Google Cloud are all examples of how large cloud infrastructures can be used as a point of leverage for service delivery. And so by having that aggregated traffic model behind a very large mobility domain, we can begin to address individual devices on our network and the applications on those devices. That's something that we don't have if you look at a wireline network. It's something we don't have when we're behind a CPE in a small business that is doing routing functions. We really lose visibility of those devices as a network operator. So the example I use, just to kind of to give a summary of this idea that Wi-Fi is not a utility, As I said, I travel quite a bit. I spend a lot of time in airports, probably as many of you do. I see people consistently walking past the drinking fountain where there's perfectly good water, as many people would say, and there's even a bottle filler now here in the Atlanta International Airport where I am, so you can take your own reusable bottle and fill it up. People don't do that. I see them walking right by that drinking fountain and heading to the newsstand where they end up buying a bottle of water for somewhere between $1.50 and $5. Why do they do that? You know, why do folks head to that bottle of water instead of using the drinking fountain? If the idea is that they're thirsty and they just want to be able to get a drink to quench that thirst, why do they end up going to get the bottle? Well, it could be something as simple as convenience. They could want to have that water for later, and so they want to carry it on the plane with them. But in many cases, I know in my case, I'll go and find my favorite brand among these. I do it because of other attributes, because of affinity to the brand that I know and is consistent and is reliable, because of the taste of a specific bottle of water, maybe because of the size and shape of the bottle, that it fits in a bag, or they need a larger bottle because they have a family there. There's other attributes that have been tapped into here that these manufacturers and distributors of water that cause people to go right by the drinking fountain and go to the bottle of water. So I view our job here in this industry as taking Wi-Fi as a utility, as something which is relatively commodity, and moving it to the world where we're causing consumers to come and seek that particular brand out for some reason or another. Again, whether it's the onboarding and the consistency of the user experience, or whether it's something more, the services that we deliver behind that. I tapped into really the fundamental strategic concept here of monetizing a Wi-Fi network, and it comes down to this. We can increase that bottom line that you see here. That bottom line represents the number of connections that we're offering to our customers. Maybe that's inside of a home, maybe it's inside of a small business, maybe it's an outdoor Wi-Fi network. But the number of connections that we will provide to them in the form of an access point will increase at some rate. It certainly seems like we're adding a ton of access points right now, but that still doesn't capture the real opportunity that's there for us. The real opportunity that's there for us is that growth in the number of devices which are on the network. If you look at the device growth versus access point growth, there is a stark difference between the two. I've put 10x here. I'm not sure that number is super precise, but it certainly is today relatively close. And over time, there's really a logarithmic growth in the number of devices on the network. That's the monetization opportunity. It's not going to be the $20, $30, $40 per connection, selling a small business an access line, selling a home on Wi-Fi, advanced Wi-Fi router. It's going to be the individual devices, the 50 cent, the 99 cent opportunities for addressing services to a device. And let me give you a couple examples of that. The first of which is real easy for folks to understand if you're a large service provider, is offering intuitive, robust parental control filters on a per device basis. To date, we've used a lot of strategies as an industry around parental control because it's certainly a critical part of the user experience for folks who have families like myself. But the parental control experience right now is really a mess in many ways. I've got to have a piece of software for the Macs in my house. Maybe the service provider provides that. I've got to have a different piece of software for the Windows machines, for iOS devices and Android devices. There are perhaps two different apps, and I have to use parental control filters that Apple or Google provides. So what we get to is you having to have IT administration skills as a parent just to prevent our kids from getting into trouble and doing things on the internet and providing that safe environment for them. Well, if we provide those controls in the network, if we do that on a per device basis in the network, which is one of the key advantages of having the aggregated traffic model, of having the service delivery model that we're talking about today. Having those network controls built into the network, parental controls built into the network, gives us a completely different opportunity and relationship with our customers. We can, on a per device basis, say for 50 cents or 99 cents or $2, that we can implement in the network real-time, up-to-date controls no matter where that device connects without any intervention on the device itself. We simply use a control panel, and we say that this device has parental control filters, and it follows them wherever they go. We start to get into a much more 3GPP-like or licensed mobile-like service delivery model where devices are recognized by the network and can have services delivered against them. Tremendous opportunity for monetization. The second example I'll give you here before we get into sort of the nuts and bolts of the network solution itself is around IoT. So if I look at the wave of devices that are coming online, I think of a refrigerator, and I think of my mom and dad, late 60s. Dad's kind of a technical person, but he brought his new smart fridge home, and he's leaned over the front of it trying to tap the network name in, and he's trying to tap the web key, the WPA key in. What I'm thinking of is a much more seamless experience where the service provider, in his case Comcast, perhaps has an SSID or a relationship with the consumer electronics manufacturers where he brings that fridge home and the fridge recognizes, by virtue of the fact that there's a special SSID being broadcast, the fridge recognizes that there is it's a Comcast home, and Comcast and Samsung have agreed to make the onboarding experience much more pleasant for my dad. And he can sit down at his computer with a web browser or with his phone on an app and be able to complete the setup of that refrigerator without having to go through the onerous process of tapping in networks and ensuring connectivity and IP addresses. So this is a strategic differentiator for a service provider. If we look at what the differentiator between a service provider and an OTT player is, the difference is that the service provider owns the network. They can have the network be responsive and implement capabilities in the network that are just not possible if you're simply using it as the network as a commodity transport. So these are some, hopefully getting you thinking about different monetization opportunities around individual devices in your network, and that that includes networks which are broadcast in an outdoor environment, hopefully in a venue, as we start to, as Adeline mentioned rightly, venues, crossing the chasm between an outdoor network and a venue is certainly a point of contention today, and I fully expect service providers to be able to make their way into venues to complete that footprint in their service areas, and then be able to really work with the venue operators on a two-sided business model for monetization. So we're going to look at some of the network technologies that the Benu solution provides that help enable some of these things. The case study here is a major U.S. cable operator, unnamed, that we have worked with over the past few years. They have announced over 8 million home hotspots deployed over the past several years with a very large ramp-up in the course of 2014. It's across all of their regions across the United States. It's integrated with their outdoor Wi-Fi networks, of which they have many 100,000 access points. It's integrated and offered in some of their small business locations. They provide their specific network available in small business locations. And additionally, they have a scheme where they have sponsored guest access. So if you're not a subscriber of this particular operator, you can have a couple hours or a certain amount of time per month free, where the operator effectively has some free advertising and can let folks know what a great amenity this particular network is for them, in addition to the home service. The key attributes of this, and this first one is really, really critical. The open architecture that we use allows you to use many multi-vendor CPE. So the idea here is you're not leveraged against a single vendor for hotspots which live inside the home or outdoors or in a venue. It's open architectures, open protocols that allow you to bring back the traffic in an aggregated model into the network, and that really helps the economic price point of deployment of this network, having that multi-vendor capability. As I mentioned several times, it's aggregated in the region with some load balancing and resiliency built in by virtue of the overlay technology we'll talk about, and they have device addressability and analytics. So we have information as devices connect to the network about where they connected. We know how much time they spent online and how many bits they consumed in what location. So taking a look at the technology here that lives behind this, the Benu platform, here shown as the Wi-Fi mobile gateway, is integrated on the left-hand side with the access point vendors. The specific case study that we're looking at really was around home spots, so the deployment of the service provider's network inside of people's homes. It uses the existing home gateway that has been deployed by this service provider and was, in addition to providing the private network, the private home network, which is part of the base cable package, it also provides an open SSID, which is this operator's network. The traffic comes back from that CPE over a service overlay, here shown as this tunnel, this Ethernet over GRE tunnel. It's an open specification, open protocol, supported by a wide number of vendors and supported in open source firmware. It uses the access network as really a commodity transport, or as an underlay, very similar to a data center underlay model. In fact, for our demonstrations that we do at Benu, we carry some very low-cost access points made by TP-Link, as a matter of fact, one of the low-end manufacturers. We put our own open-source derived firmware on there that's got a small number of changes from Open WRT, if you're familiar with that. And we can set that up in most locations, in a hotel or in an office building. We can simply connect, and as long as we have IP connectivity back to our gateway in Boston, then we can do our demonstration for our customers. Really a very, very powerful sort of connectivity model, not unlike what is used in some of the enterprise Wi-Fi networks, but in this case, geared towards service provider and geared towards service provider requirements. We also show here the integration with the outdoor hotspot through a number of vendors that they have, and that again rides the commodity access network, all aggregated into a small number of Benu platforms in each region. These platforms have extremely high scale, and so they provide for that large mobility domain that I talked about before, and also provide for a single point of back office integration. Here shown as the AAA server and the web portal for captive portal authentication. So this type of network overlay model, while seemingly very simple, the capabilities around doing very, very high scale aggregation and single point of integration are really two of the key attributes which enable the monetization that we talked about before. Again, the back office here, the AAA integration might be native to the service provider, or it might be a partner service provider in another region or in another part of the world, which allows customers to not only use the open SSID provided by the operator inside homes and outdoor, but also while they're traveling and roaming. So right away we've unlocked that roaming business model. We've unlocked the capability of offering sponsored access, day passes. We've unlocked a number of different capabilities in the network for service delivery to individual devices. Now this is where we are today, and really what people are looking at, and we've talked several times about the trusted model around connectivity. And so we're quickly moving, both as an industry, as well as Benu, as well as our customer here, moving towards a secure model, trusted model, often known as Hotspot 2.0. Passpoint is the marketing term for that. And really what that does is it adds on the 802.1x based authentication mechanisms into the network. That means that people don't connect to an open network, but instead they use some sort of credential to connect. That comes in the form of a username, password. It comes in the form of a certificate that might be downloaded, or it may be derived from the SIM credentials in the case of a network operator who's converged. We find that all three methods are in use with a little bit of a bias towards certificate and SIM-based authentication depending upon the region. And in addition, we've shown on this diagram the integration with an existing WLAN controller. So maybe you have a venue or you have an enterprise where they have an existing Wi-Fi controller that's providing advanced RRM and configuration and firmware management services onto the APs. That can still be integrated into a WAG, a Wi-Fi mobile gateway, as shown here, which gives you, again, the more access points you capture into a single mobility domain and integration point, the better your opportunity for monetization will be. Finally, I'll show one other integration point here down in the lower right. For operators that are converged, or operators that are considering partnering with a licensed mobile network, or vice versa. Maybe you're on the phone today, you're an MNO, and you're looking to partner with a service provider who is doing Wi-Fi only deployments. There are integration points, defined integration points between the two platforms. So in the case here, we show the Wi-Fi mobile gateway. The WAG is integrated with a 3G and a 4G packet core over the 3GPP defined interfaces, G and S interfaces. And so what this allows is it allows a couple different flavors depending upon really your point of view. If you're an operator that has a large Wi-Fi network and you want to perhaps get into an MVNO, you want to offer services over a licensed mobile network, this allows you to anchor your sessions back into your Wi-Fi gateway. So it allows the Wi-Fi gateway to really to act like a licensed packet core will, giving you the economics and, again, the single point of service delivery for all of your services. On the flip side, you have the other model. You can use the access from the Wi-Fi to come and anchor into the licensed packet core. Maybe you're a mobile operator and you have people coming over Wi-Fi. So really, it just, again, depends on your point of view. I'm sure that there's, somebody else who has this diagram that's drawn exactly the same way, except the boxes are different sizes. Probably the packet gateway is larger and the WAG is smaller. The idea is that we want to be able to offer that service continuity, the ubiquity of services across all the connection types. So let's finish up here by talking about, what are the business cases around carrier-grade Wi-Fi. You want your customers to always be connected to you, and you want to be connected to your customer. Again, the primary value proposition is that connection. You can't do anything more. You can't innovate with services unless you go on top of a robust connection. We want to keep and retain customers. We talked about the churn reduction, and we want the customers to have a great experience and enable new business models. Here are some of the things we've talked about today, and community Wi-Fi, which is the case study that we gave, is it extraordinarily powerful. Folks, I apologize about that. My PowerPoint is absolutely got a mind of its own today. We want to have that community Wi-Fi, those new business models that allow people to have connections wherever they are. This community Wi-Fi, home as a hotspot, tremendously powerful. Well, I'm just going to leave it like this, guys. Tremendously powerful to endearing yourself with your customer. I know that I'm a subscriber of Comcast here in Atlanta, Georgia. When I go to my dad's house, when I go to other folks' house, I get connected to that Xfinity network no matter where I am. And that's a pretty powerful retention tool. I know if I ever get tempted by another operator, I'm going to remember that I have that Wi-Fi there. Mobile data offload and roaming. We see a tremendous amount of activity globally on offload. It's been publicly announced that Liberty Global and Comcast will be allowing Wi-Fi roaming between their customer bases. Some of the details are yet to come out. I'm not real sure if it's a paid or if it's an amenity, but the idea is that as you travel to another region, that you have that connectivity. And by the way, that gives you the opportunity to deploy home services, the same services you would have in your home region, in another region of the world. Wholesaling and vanity SSID. So I talked a bit about the IoT example and how we can have a vanity or a wholesale SSID for consumer electronics devices to come on board. Maybe it's something even more simple than that. Maybe Time Warner Cable in Manhattan during Fashion Week would have an SSID called Vogue, and Condé Nast would sponsor that particular SSID and be able to reach customers in a sort of a two-sided business model there. As we get down into location-based services and analytics, certainly a platform like ours generates a tremendous amount of data. It's available through both the AAA infrastructure, but also as part of APIs that we provide. And taking that information, which gives you a sense of where people are, what they're doing, how they roam, the different places that they connect, that sort of data is ripe for monetization as you take that and offer a service to your customers. I'm thinking of a small business service where an operator has a tremendous amount of data about those people that visit the small business and can use that in partnership with the small business for social check-ins, for email campaigns, for offline campaigns, mailers. There's all sorts of things which come from those. And we'll see a tremendous amount of activity over the next 12 to 24 months in analytics and location-based services. So Adeline, that completes my presentation, and sorry for the technical difficulties there at the end, but I'll pass it back over to you to finish up.
Thank you, Clayton. I mean, this was great. Great insights into the possible business models and the exciting opportunity around IoT and M2M and the billions of connected devices here. I want to remind the audience to use the chat box if they want to submit their questions. I would like to ask you a question. How you indicated you're dealing with a lot of operators, I suppose from different backgrounds and mixes. How far are we from the IoT opportunity? The billions of devices connected, and what needs to happen in terms of change of perception, or is it investment required, or I understand this is a big opportunity. How far is it away from becoming a reality?
Well, I think if you look at what the licensed wireless folks have been doing with what they've called M2M, or the Internet of Things, certainly in the United States we've seen AT&T and Verizon have very specific pushes around getting the number of devices on board their licensed networks. I think if I look at the number of Wi-Fi only devices, I think it's inevitable that in the next 12 to 18 months that we will see some sort of very significant activity in the marriage of IoT and Wi-Fi. I mentioned the number of home automation devices that are Wi-Fi only, and the adoption of those devices, whether it's a drop cam or a Nest, the adoption of those devices has really just begun. When we make the connectivity experience seamless as an industry, that's when those folks will really experience a second wave of adoption. And make no mistakes, nobody has marketing muscle like a consumer electronics manufacturer. So I think that the gap is closing very quickly, and my prediction is between 12 and 18 months we will see a significant change in the way those connected devices and Wi-Fi networks interoperate. Certainly as you heard me say, we're trying to work with our customers and the business folks in understanding what sort of business models there are. It's not just as simple as saying, A pays B for a following service. All of these are very two-sided business models that see money changing hands between not only the consumer and the service provider, but the consumer and the manufacturer and the service provider. That's where the real interest lies in the next steps.
Okay, this makes sense. And I get a lot of the question about, and I know we have touched on that over and over again, but it's when will Wi-Fi become a real money maker as opposed to reduce churn and reduce cost of RAN capacity through Wi-Fi offload, and I know there is a myriad of business models being tested and all, but there's a perception out there that nobody's making money with Wi-Fi. Is that what would you respond to that?
Well, I would say based on the experience that I've seen, people are making money. It's just not, again, that straight line that people would expect where you turn the left knob and you see the dial go up. I know that I spoke to the churn reduction. Again, it's kind of boring, but it's real cash flow. Churn reduction equates reduction in churn is a pretty straight line towards free cash flow for an operator. I was surprised to learn in the Asian market the last 2 weeks that the folks, there's a lot of charging for Wi-Fi over there. That there's some amount of parity, at least in parts of mainland China. There's parity between Wi-Fi pricing and LTE pricing, and that is because Wi-Fi pricing is meant to be closer to LTE, not because LTE is down low where Wi-Fi is, if that makes sense. So I think we need to get out of the paradigm. If we have folks that are still stuck in the idea that we're going to charge for Wi-Fi availability, we can't live like that, because there's always going to be a free option. You will always be competing with Wi-Fi. If it's a choice of paying for a network in a hotel or seeing the cable Wi-Fi broadcast outside, I will get closer to the window and I'll use cable Wi-Fi because it's part of my package. What we need to do is understand the relationship between that availability of Wi-Fi and the other things that consumers will buy. In the case of an operator, it's the triple play package or the services which layer on top of that. I'll return to my example of parental control filters. I have 3 kids in my house. I certainly am a ripe customer. I'm waiting for someone to give me robust network-based parental controls. that are easy to administer. I'm a very technical guy, but I don't like to spend my time configuring things and configuring software. I love point and click. So I think we just need to understand that the monetization is not around availability of Wi-Fi. It's the next steps beyond that. It's the experience, it's the services that we layer behind that, and it's the other two-sided business models as we lean forward to IoT.
Excellent. Maybe a final question before closing today's event. In your view, are there two different behaviors or reactions from cable/fixed operators versus the MNOs? Do they have different attitudes in terms of embracing this whole paradigm of new Wi-Fi monetization strategies?
So I think the answer is pretty clearly yes, and I don't ascribe any fault to either side. When I say this, I don't. I'm certainly a huge proponent of Wi-Fi, but when you have an operator who has focused on the construction of a very robust network like an LTE network, certainly the focus of that operator is going to be monetizing that network and achieving the best return on their investment possible. And so in many cases, Wi-Fi has been relegated to sort of a secondary tier of connectivity where it's used for perhaps venue-based or hospitality-based, or in the case of someone like AT&T, they have a relatively robust Wi-Fi network, but it pales in comparison to others that are being built. On the flip side, if you take an operator like a traditional cable operator in the United States who has not had a licensed network, they have used that same capital pool or a similar capital pool to deploy Wi-Fi as their wireless network. So too, would they not focus on the license side because it's just not part of their network today? They want to invest and monetize around the things that they've invested in. It's been very clear to me over the past 6 months that as the licensed world moves into technologies like small cells and into a more Wi-Fi-like coverage model where the small cell size and finite amount of bandwidth, and as Wi-Fi grows into larger mobility domains, there starts to be a tremendous blending between unlicensed and licensed technologies. I won't even call it Wi-Fi, but I'll say unlicensed and licensed technologies. And that's why I say 5 years from now, I think we'll be talking about wireless monetization strategies and not necessarily Wi-Fi. I think that's been pretty clear to me. We're not there yet. We still have these islands, as you said. I think it's very well said that they are, that they're islands and there's an inconsistent experience. But I think clearly we need to expect as an industry that the monetization that we're putting in place for Wi-Fi will reach towards that of 3GPP and vice versa.
Well, this is an excellent conclusion point, which ends today's webinar. I want to thank you, Clayton, for sharing your thoughts and insights. I want to thank the audience for participating and listening, and of course Benu Networks for sponsoring this event. Just a reminder, this event has been recorded and will be available for replay along with the slide deck. I want to thank everybody and see you at the next webinar. Thank you.